Tamara Cortoos did everything right: corporate success, career milestones, life goals checked off like clockwork. And one day she asked herself, whose life am I actually living? Paul here from My Perfect Failure, helping you turn your failures into successes and your setbacks into opportunities. Midlife often gets branded a crisis, but what if it's actually your most powerful opportunity? Tamara's journey is for anyone who's ever felt stuck in a life that no longer fits. In this episode, you'll hear how Tamara went from corporate exit to founding the Midlife Crossroads Academy, and how 3 simple steps can help you shift from who you've been to who you're meant to become. Tamara's work has inspired midlifers across the globe to reimagine aging not as decline but as transformation. Her academy gives people tools to thrive in midlife, not just survive it. So if you're ready to realign instead of reinventing and want to stop settling, this episode is your permission slip. So listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Who knows what Jay-Z, J.K. Rowling, Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey all have in common? Okay, I will tell you then. They have all overcome failure in one shape or form to go on to gain success in their respective careers. Welcome to My Perfect Failure. Join us as we delve into the world of our perfect failures. We will interview, explore, and discuss how our perfect failures can lead us to success. Join us and tune in.
Welcome everybody to another episode of My Perfect Failure. Today, I'm super excited because I have another amazing guest for you. So my guest today, her early 40s weren't the smooth, confident years she expected. They were messy and full of unanswered questions. That journey led her to create the Midlife Crossroads Academy, helping people navigate midlife with clarity and confidence. As a midlife guide, she believes in realignment over reinvention, offering a practical guide rather than quick fixes. Passionate about deep conversations, fresh perspectives, she challenges how we see midlife as the best is yet to come. So, very warm welcome to My Perfect Failure, Tamara Cortoos. How are you?
Thanks, Paul. Thanks so much for the intro and for having me on your podcast.
I'm excited. So, we've had a number of conversations.
Yes.
And I kind of pitched the podcast to you probably like in our first conversation, and I was pleased when I got an email to say, I think this could be I think we could have a nice chat about a really interesting subject, important subject that, to my mind, I was saying to you before we hit the record button, midlife was something that I was aware of from. I can't even remember when I was aware of it, but I was aware of it from a youngster, and it's something that I think I don't know that much about it, although I am your core audience, so I'm in that space. So I think it's something that, to me, it's a bit of a taboo subject, I think. And also I think, and this is I'm putting assumptions here as well. And also I think it's something that, not all, but I think there's a strong majority of us that when things go maybe not according to plan, when we're in that space, what we call midlife, whatever that is, that we can think, okay, midlife, so it's meant to happen. Things are meant to be a little bit difficult, slow down. Maybe my expectations in terms of my achievements and so forth, and my expectations should decline, should come down, and we accept that. And to me, that is no way to live. That's why when we spoke and you told me that your midlife crossroads guide, I was just, wow, this is something that I want to know more about. So thanks for that email. Thanks for this amazing conversation we're about to have. So just a little bit about you for people that aren't aware of Tamara. Who is Tamara? Then we'll get into how you yourself helping me and everybody else with midlife Crossroads.
Okay. Yes, I'm Tamara Cortoos, and I guess my story might sound pretty familiar to a lot of your listeners. As I said in the introduction, by my early 40s, I had spent nearly 20 years building what looked like a successful life, right? I'd lived in Barcelona, in London, in Sydney. I'd built a great career. I got married. I had two amazing kids, still have them. Traveled to some incredible places, all the things that you're supposed to do to add up to a happy, fulfilled life as a grown up. I call it, the adult checklist. I ticked all those boxes. And then one day I looked in the mirror and I didn't recognize the person looking back at me. I just felt really lost and restless, like somehow I'd taken a wrong turn. And even though I'd followed this checklist, I'd taken all the right steps. And that moment changed everything for me. It took me quite some time, but I started to realize that many of us hit a point in life where we start questioning everything. And it's called midlife. And more importantly, I guess, I realized that midlife isn't just a crisis. You mentioned it before, the whole negativity around midlife. It's an incredible opportunity to change that not a lot of people are aware of. And that's actually why I created Midlife Crossroads Academy, to help people stop waiting for things to almost magically get better and then start creating a midlife that excites them. Because feeling like you failed at midlife, like I did, I felt like I was failing at midlife. It might actually be the best thing that happens to you. And I want people to realize that. Hence,
Okay.
Midlife Crossroads Academy.
Okay. That's really interesting because I think sometimes when we navigate through life and we've done things the same way for a considered period of time, sometimes it's almost that we've ring fence those habits. Those habits become us.
Yeah.
And then we either we accept them as the norm because those are heavily entrenched behaviors,
Yes.
or we feel that maybe we don't have the confidence, or maybe we don't even have the clarity. We don't stop and reflect like you did to think, this doesn't feel like me. That moment when you stopped and you were like, this doesn't feel like me. How did you know that you had to do something?
I did have that moment, but I guess I need to tell you a bit of a backstory to help you understand why that moment was such a big moment for me, like really a catalyst in my life. Like, midlife hit me really hard, right? For me, it was like running into a wall of unmet expectations and everything that vision that I always had where I'd be when I was in midlife, career-wise, personally, everything. It just didn't match reality. And the gap made me feel like I was falling short. The reasons why I felt like, the build up to the catalyst point where everything kind of boiled over. The first reason was definitely that my career had lost its spark. I'd spent years in evidence-based consulting, and for a very long time, I loved it. And then one day, I didn't. I felt stuck, like I wasn't learning or growing anymore. And every time a client or my company came to me with a challenge, I caught myself thinking, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. It's really, my job started to feel repetitive. And for me, that was very demotivating because I'd always been an extremely ambitious person. And objectively, I knew there was still more to learn, but deep down, it felt like I'd hit a dead end. To me, that's how it felt. And then there was what I now know, it's called the comparison trap. I kept seeing people, my peers, friends, family members, and they seem to have it all figured out. I'm not just talking about social media photos. It's much more than that. I would look at their lives, their job titles, their successes, and I would really think, why don't I have this? And again, when you look at that, when you take a step back, it was a completely crazy thought to have, because on paper, I had a lot too. The successful career, I had a thriving business in Australia, I had 2 beautiful kids, amazing travel experiences. But instead of appreciating all that, I just kept asking myself, why does it feel like I'm failing? I just didn't appreciate it. Then there was regret, a typical midlife element as well. I just couldn't stop thinking about opportunities that I didn't take. For instance, after university, I was asked 3 times in a row, come back and do a PhD. And I always said no to that. And now I started thinking, like, what if I'd said yes to that? Would I be working in a field where I made a real impact? What if I hadn't studied economics and I had studied law instead? And would I have become this human rights lawyer I'd always dreamed about? Had I been shutting doors permanently? There's a lot of what ifs that I started to feel regret about. And it makes it sound like everything was career related, but that's not quite true. On top of it, I just felt really restless, like my life had become this loop of responsibilities and it was so monotonous. And I very often thought to myself, I was standing in the grocery store and I looked around and I thought, how did I end up like this? This is not where I was supposed to be. And it's so easy then to wonder if I'd wasted my best years. I had always assumed that by my 40s, I would have figured it all out and I would feel confident and clear about my future. But instead, I felt so lost and unsure of what was next. And then I looked into the mirror, the whole place where it started, And aging had never really worried me until suddenly it did. I looked at other women my age and I thought, like, oh, why do they look so much better than me? I felt like I was failing at something as basic as aging. So that's the whole mindset that I had at the time. But I'm a very pragmatic, solution-oriented person, right? So with all of that mindset that I had, my solution was to retrain. I got certified in change management. I wanted to pivot into something new, like a new career, new ambitions to achieve. And then basically came the moment that for me changed everything. At my very first interview, I was feeling really good. I was talking about all the experience, the knowledge, my skills, everything that I could bring to the table, how keen I was to use that in a new industry. And then the HR manager looked at me and he said, you have amazing experience, so useful. But I'm sorry, we can't hire you. You're too old to hire. And I remember how shocked I was. I can still, like, that drop in my stomach. I did not know what to say. I honestly couldn't respond. I had never until that moment thought as myself as too old for something. And someone was saying that now to my face. That, for me, was the final straw, because I thought, like, I'm already struggling with all these typical midlife questions. I've been trying to find answers. And the only things I found was all this shallow advice, the midlife cliches. And now someone threw ageism into the mix, something on top of everything else already. And to me, that was it. I got really frustrated. No, maybe even frustrated is the wrong word. I just got angry. And in a way, I guess I should be grateful for that moment, because it pushed me to take action. I thought about how there was no help available to deal with midlife challenges and questions. Like, midlifers are just left to figure it all out by themselves. We have primary, secondary, tertiary education. It's all meant to help you become a grown-up. But once you've been an adult for a couple of decades, you're just supposed to have all the answers, and you don't. You just don't. So I decided to figure out a way to find answers and solutions. And I started researching everything I could about midlife, psychology, social science, leadership, coaching, communications, you name it. I read academic papers, I took courses, I spoke to lots of other midlifers who I then found out they were just as lost as me. And to process it all, I started writing. So after a while, I ended up with, I call it a manual, a guide that explains what you're going through in midlife and why that is, and what the different steps are that you need to take to turn midlife into something really positive and powerful. And it included a lot more than the challenges I was personally dealing with. And then I realized, actually, I wanted to share that manual with other midlifers because I knew from all of that research and the conversations I had that other people could also benefit from my knowledge, my insights, and the solutions that I found. And that's how Midlife Crossroads Academy was born. So that's a very, very long answer to your question, Paul.
No, it's a good answer. And I appreciate the clarity. Have you thought about including maybe a program for HR managers with zero emotional intelligence in the Midlife Crossroads Academy? That probably that sounds like that there's a requirement there.
I know you might mean it a little bit as a joke, but I have thought about down the line going into companies and helping people there to see how much midlifers still have to offer and how to optimally use them in a company rather than push them to the side, overlooking them because they're too old to actually use their talents and wisdom and skills better.
Yeah, no, it is a joke, but it's serious as well because actually it's quite scary that somebody that not scary, is scary that somebody that's got an important role within a business, like a pivotal role within a company. Not only did he think that, or she, they said it, and also it's totally misguided and wrong. And how can that company be confident that they're going to get the best in class, regardless of age, for jobs? It's like, come to the interview. If you come to the interview, it means that you fit the criteria. So maybe that might happen in years or months to come, that does come into play. Because I'm sure there are lots and lots of fabulous HR professionals that would be mortified to hear that, and I'm sure they would think, that shouldn't be the norm. That isn't a question that should be asked. So, just going back to some of what you've just kindly referenced, when you were going through these moments, what was that? What would you coin that? Would you coin that? Well, actually, maybe a better question is: do you have a personal definition of midlife? What does that mean to you? Is it midlife? Is it midlife crisis? Is it midlife crossroads? Is there or is it quite arbitrary? Is it difficult to pin it down?
It is quite difficult to pin it down. Ask 10 people what midlife is, and you'll get 10 different definitions. Some will mention the midlife crisis. Others, they will just shrug and say, it's just a number, it's no big deal. Someone else will say, it's an exciting, transformative time in life. Which one is right? I think all of them and none of them. I find it really hard to define midlife because it's not really a one size fits all kind of thing. It's not a strict age range or a single experience. It's more like a phase of life that stretches from 35 these days already to 75. And I know that's a really wide range, but the thing is, midlife isn't about age. It's about a shift. It's a moment or a series of moments when you start to look at your life and ask yourself questions like, for instance, is this what I really want from my life? Or where did all those years go? Or what's next for me in life? And maybe you're like I was, like, feeling restless in a job that you once loved, or your kids are growing up and your role as a parent is changing. Or maybe you've ticked all, the life boxes on the adult checklist, the career, the family, the stability, but something still feels off and you know it. That is midlife knocking.
Okay.
And
yeah. I was just thinking about your situation, that when you looked in the mirror and you had those different situations that made you think and reflect and become more aware that there was something that you needed to do to because it didn't feel like you because you were getting more restless, and then ultimately you did something. And the reason I'm going down this line is that I think there's a lot of us that think that have those thoughts, are restless, but we don't act. We don't recognize that maybe we're in that midlife, situation, and maybe we just don't know how to act. Maybe we look at our family, we look at our friends, and to your point, where we compare, we think, well, they're getting on with it. Why shouldn't I be getting on with it? But we don't. Maybe they're not getting on with it. Maybe they're in the same in the moment, but they are like us, where they're not pausing, reflecting, and thinking, maybe this is a point for me to stop, to reflect, and maybe think about what do I want this next phase of my life to look like, to be? What do I need to do to engage that, to impact that? So, what's your maybe advice or sort of initial steps for people that are in that phase where maybe is happy, well, maybe I'm healthy, all those things are there, but I am having those restless moments.
Because if they realize that they are having those moments, that's already a very good first step to take, right? Because when you think about it, that means that you realize, well, you have a positive mindset to start with, and you realize that you're in midlife, and you realize that midlife is about transformation because you're open to change. That's a really big step once people realize that. Not everybody does. And transformation really is about shifting from where you've been to who you're becoming. And that transformation, I guess, that doesn't happen overnight. It's really a process in 3 steps. And the first step is it's all about reevaluating, where you think about what you really want in the next phase. The second step is about releasing, where you let go of things that no longer serve you. And the third step is about rebuilding, where you work on creating a future you're excited about. And yes, as I said, like some people step into midlife feeling stuck or lost, and others feel ready for a fresh start. But actually, no matter where you're at, midlife is never the end of the road. It's the beginning of something new. And that is something that not everybody realizes. So if you're between 35 and 75 and you've been wondering, what now? It's actually a really good thing because that's where change in midlife begins.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I'm thinking around those moments and the action. What does that look like? Because I'm thinking that there would be people that this really resonates with. Then they might think, well, how do I act? Where do I get that courage, that confidence to act? You did that, and you're doing it. And how do you have to have an element of confidence or courage just to? 'Cause sometimes what happens in life, people can box us in. People expect us to be a certain person, live a certain way, and sometimes maybe when I say we, maybe I'm thinking about me a little bit as well. But I think sometimes we feel that people expect us to be a certain type of person, to act in a certain sort of way, and do something that we've always done. And then when we suddenly decide, you know what, I'm going to retrain. I'm going to maybe look at midlife, or maybe I'm going to start a podcast, or maybe I'm going to look at shift careers. And sometimes we have to almost disregard what we think other people think. Maybe some people might say it to us, but sometimes it's just actually what we think, and we haven't even asked them. So, what are your thoughts around that?
You're totally right. You do need, as I said before, you need to be open to change. Very, very big role in that. It's one of the things that I always go on and on about in Midlife Crossroads Academy. One of the key things that you need in midlife is the right people around you. You need cheerleaders, like people who will lift you up, even when things get difficult. Because it is often difficult to go against who you've always been, right? People have a certain image of you, but with the right people around you, if you feel like you are ready to change and become something and leave the role that you've always had behind you, you should find people who, when you tell them about your plans or the goals you want to achieve, they're not immediately talking about all the negatives. You need people around you who will support you to achieve those goals. And if things don't work out as planned, you need those people that will help you get through that instead of just saying, I told you so. Like surrounding yourself with the right people, absolutely key. But yes, on top of that, of course, you need to not just be open to change, but be willing to take action as well and go through a phase that will most likely be uncomfortable for you. It will be difficult. It's not easy to just leave your part of yourself behind and kind of change direction in life when you're 40, 50, 55, 60, whatever it is. Not easy. And I never said that it would be easy, but I always say it is possible.
And I don't think it's meant to be easy. Nothing in life worth doing, I think, is easy. So I totally agree with you. I've just written down your book. I think you said something around that, and it sort of triggered a thought. And I don't know where I heard it, but I heard somebody say this. Maybe I've heard a number of people say it. But it's like our book is a series of chapters, and it's like, what do we want? What, if we were to have a book about us, what would we want? The chapters from where we are now to look like. And I think that what the amazing work that you're doing, I think it helps us think about our book. What do we want those next chapters to be like? And it's like, can we be our own hero where we can read it and think, actually, you did go through it, you did engage it. And I think people, the reason why I love what you're doing is because I really do think that people can settle because they just don't know how to, or maybe they've not even thought about it. There's this acceptance thing that I think happens a lot where we are used to doing the same thing, going to the same job, maybe having the same conversations. And even when we long since we've kind of like disengaged with it and we do the same thing from Monday to Friday or whatever our work pattern is. And then we long for those 2 days off, whatever they are positioned in the week, just to kind of just breathe. Then the cycle begins again.
People they find some comfort in the routine, but inside they know, because it's their gut telling them that it's just not right. There's something that they know. And also people don't like to change, right? It goes against our nature. We find comfort in routine. But midlife is really your chance to change. It's almost like if you were looking for an excuse to make a change in your life, you can use midlife as a change. I'm not saying a midlife crisis, but in midlife, it is pretty acceptable to change because it comes with age. But keep in mind as well, by the time you get to midlife, you have all this life experience, right? You don't just jump into things anymore. You've got wisdom and knowledge, and you've got your skills. You might not be aware of all of them, because that's something we do need to talk about. Self-awareness is very important in midlife. But you come with so much, I'm not going to call it baggage, but you've got so much that your toolkit, let's call it a toolkit.
I like toolkit.
Yes. You bring all of that with, so you're a lot less likely to just jump blindly into a massive big change. You think, you consider, you look at the pros and the cons, before you make a change. That's something that Midlife Crossroads Academy helps you with as well. Like, but we always say, like, find a goal and work towards it. It doesn't need to be a big goal. It can be, if that suits you. If you want to move abroad and change career completely, go for it. But if it's just a small change, good enough. But have a goal in life again. Don't just settle. You don't have to. You've got 40, maybe even 50 years left of your life. Like, do you really want to settle? Why would you? Why?
Yeah, and I think it's where your academy comes into play. I think it's that support and that clarity, that self-awareness, because I think that particularly if we don't have it within our own, because I think that a lot of people don't talk about this, and maybe there's some, we've used the word acceptance a little bit since we've been talking. So it's almost in this support system, this clarity, giving us this awareness so we can have these conversations, so we can think, we can be encouraged, be excited by a new phase in our lives, and realize this is ours, and we don't have to, I don't know whether you have this phrase in Belgium, we talk called a hamster wheel. We can get off the hamster wheel and we can really think about, yeah, this is what I want to do now.
Yes, indeed. And it's absolutely important to take action in midlife. And a lot of people don't want to do it because they're afraid of change. I mentioned that, or they feel overwhelmed because there's too many changes happening in their lives at once. Maybe your kids are growing up and your parents are getting a little bit older and need care, and you've got some, you don't feel right in your job anymore. There's a lot of and happening, and it's overwhelming. Or some people just feel ashamed about midlife and experiencing the typical questions as well. They think like, oh my God, we've only mentioned it a little bit, but the midlife crisis is a stigma to them.
You know what's interesting? Because sometimes you can, so when we are in that, whatever that sort of phase where we talk about midlife, so if stigma arises, I think, when sometimes we might want to make a change, and somebody says, okay, he pulls in a midlife crisis, he's doing all these things that he wasn't doing before. So, but then you can have people that, say, the celebrities, if they decide they're going to do something new, they're kind of like applauded. They're given, it's almost like a different dynamic. And no, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's true. There's a big stigma around midlife for ordinary people like you and me, because of the association between the word midlife and crisis. Like, if you make a big change in your 40s, people are very quick to say, oh, that's a midlife crisis. It's almost, the association almost comes automatic, and it is such a negative thing as well. I've had it that someone who I really respect, he said to me when I was just starting out Midlife Crossroads Academy, and I asked him for help to help me build some brand awareness and contact his own network. And he said, Tamara, I wish you all the best, really, but I can't help you because being associated with your business might make people think I'm having a midlife crisis, and that could hurt my business, because he also had a company. And I mean, it just shows how deeply ingrained that connection between midlife and crisis really is. For some people, they just won't understand. And for them, midlife is something to be embarrassed about. Imagine.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, you mentioned the word midlife and they immediately go like, oh yeah, the red sports car, dating someone half your age, dressing like you're 18, getting a tattoo, a facelift, doing something impulsive or dramatic. There's such typical cliches around midlife. And they're rubbish, eh? It's true. Some people do that, some. But to be honest, the questions that you have around midlife, look, once you get into midlife and you realize you have all these questions, they are very typical of the period in life called midlife. That's one thing. Virtually everyone will ask themselves those questions at some point in their life. Maybe not at 35 yet, but by 45, I guarantee you'll have asked some of the questions already. For some people, they do turn 40 and they rush out to get the red sports car. And they do seriously think about the facelift and the tattoo and getting a full sleeve. Fine. That's a minority of people. It's about, actually, when you look at the research, about 25% of midlifers have an extreme solution for dealing with midlife's doubts and challenges. Not all, that doesn't mean they all get a red sports car or full tattoo sleeve. That's not what I'm saying.
I've seen loads of sports cars later in the day when I'm out.
I know. God, there would be a lot of them driving on the streets. What I mean is they just have, like, they really, really struggle mentally with answering the questions of midlife, the very normal question everybody asks themselves, which is why I want to break that association between midlife and crisis, because they are not the same. And it's actually, I'll find it almost insulting when people go like, oh, you have a midlife crisis. I don't have a midlife crisis. I'm a very normal, ordinary person who asks herself some questions and try to find a solution.
Because midlife and crisis are totally different things. A crisis is a crisis. It's like a health, it could be something that is, that is really problematic at that time. But midlife is a stage of life. It's like every stage of life is an opportunity to develop, to learn, to reflect. And it's like, and I just think today there are so many amazing people, regardless of age. But I think there are people doing wonderful things from 50 and onwards, and 40 and onwards. And I think that we need. So I'm glad that you're doing this work. I'm not doing this work, but I'm glad you're doing this work where you're disconnecting midlife to crisis, because I do think as well that, and I don't know, this is just a thought, that when people jokingly connect, who are in that midlife sort of phase, when we jokingly connect midlife and crisis, I think that we're not helping ourselves, because we are reaffirming this notion in our minds, which I think it makes it more difficult for us to really explore, reflect, and move forward with those things that we want. And I think that guy that your colleague that or the guy that wasn't comfortable sharing or collaborating, he's probably in that midlife himself, where he's just not able to disconnect midlife opportunity, consider all the amazing things you've accomplished today, all the experience you have. Now this is you're in a unique position. You've gathered all this experience, all this wisdom. This is a great opportunity to explore what's next, not to kind of like turn up in a corner and think, bloody hell, I'm in midlife.
And I don't know if you've ever asked yourself where the term midlife crisis actually comes from. Someone, of course, invented that. We have Canada to thank for that. There was actually a psychoanalyst in 1965. His name was Elliot Jacques, and he noticed that people in their late 30s and mid 40s, they experience this period of like depression and sudden lifestyle changes. They realized life wasn't infinite, and that's when they got a little bit depressed. Psychoanalyst, so he analyzed it. But, and there's a big but to that, he did observe those changes, but his sample of people that he used were artists. It's a very, very small group of people. He noticed that their creativity kind of seemed to hit a wall at that age. But, and as often happens, that tiny little research got blown way out of proportion. This whole idea that a midlife crisis is a biological certainty, it suddenly took off, and it sparked decades of research into midlife and the so-called crisis that goes with it. So it's Elliot Jacques that we have to thank for that association between midlife and crisis. That's really
Okay. I didn't realize it was coined by somebody. So
yes.
yeah. So maybe that wasn't his finest work, because it probably hasn't done a lot of people that many favors in terms of helping them progress things. I'm going to talk about Midlife Crossroads Academy in a second, but something that I highlighted. So you talk about realignment over reinvention. I don't know whether you can expand on that.
Yeah, I do. I do talk about real, not so much reinventing. I do mention reinvention, of course. It is possible to reinvent yourself in midlife, but generally, for most people, reinvent yourself is a myth about midlife, really. When you think about it, you are a person, a fully formed person. You get into midlife. So midlife isn't about wiping the slate clean and becoming a whole new person, right? It's about evolving, taking everything that you have learned and using it in a way that fits with who you are now. So you don't have to throw away your past experiences, your skills, your passions. They're not baggage. They're actually your foundation. So forget about reinvention as starting over. You're building on what's already there. And big dramatic the answer anyway. When people talk about reinvention, it sounds like you have to quit your job, or you have to move to another country, or you need to take up skydiving to make midlife meaningful. But real change doesn't always look like a Hollywood movie. It can be subtle, like shifting your priorities, setting boundaries, making time for things that bring you joy. You don't have to burn it all down. Sometimes you just need to make a few intentional tweaks to feel more alive. And something else that people don't always consciously think about, when you get to midlife, you're not broken in any way. Another reason why you shouldn't be reinventing yourself, you're trying to find a way back to who you are. There's nothing wrong with who you are now. Um, Midlife isn't about becoming someone else. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that got buried under work or family or responsibilities that you have. You're not fixing yourself, you're listening to yourself. So that's why we always talk about realigning and not reinventing.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I think I admire people that have the confidence to adapt to evolve. Those people that they have these various chapters in their lives. They live out those chapters, and then they get to a point, pretty much what you've described today, where it doesn't feel well. Actually, we probably feel out of alignment. So when you feel out of alignment, you're able to take stock and think about what do I need to tweak? What do I need to do to actually come back into alignment? And it's you again, to your point, I'm plagiarizing everything you just said, but it's almost using those wonderful assets and skills and knowledge that we have, and then seeing, what does that look like with me doing something else? And I think that's a real skill that I think everybody, I think, would pay a lot of money to be able to do, because I do think that, when I meet up with friends, family, just people in general that I know, definitely there are conversations around, they're not that happy with this, that, and the other. And maybe there's definitely, I don't know, thoughts around, or curiosity, or maybe frustration around how to maybe access what I want to access for that next phase, and maybe a little bit of uncertainty. So I definitely wanted to ask around Midlife Crossroads Academy. what that looks like. I mentioned to you before we hit the record button. I've been on your website the last few days. I love your website. Love what you're doing with there. There's lots for people to get access to explore, to do different things with different people. Maybe you can give us a little rundown about what the Midlife Crossroads Academy is and how we can access that.
Yeah, sure. Well, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, that Midlife Crossroads Academy is born from one big frustration that I had, and that's that there's no education to prepare you for midlife. That was really my starting point. That there's no course, there's no school, there's no manual, there's no guidelines, and you're just expected to figure it all out yourself. And no one just knows how to navigate midlife challenges or answer the big questions that start creeping in. You have to learn how to do that. And that's why I started Midlife Crossroads Academy, to give people tools and answers and strategies to handle midlife in a way that actually works. And some people have asked me if it's the same as life coaching. And in some ways, yes, it is. At MCA, Midlife Crossroads Academy, I work with people who are ready to take action, right? It's not just about listening and nodding along. You have to put in the work. And that's something that we do take from coaching. But traditional coaching says that all the answers are already inside you. You just need to, answer questions to bring them out. Whereas I say, yeah, that's a nice idea. But to be honest, if you had all the answers, you wouldn't be feeling stuck right now. So I don't just rely on coaching principles. I borrow from mentoring as well. Mentor shapes, well, they share their own experience to help you shape your path. And we do that to some extent at MCA, but we don't assume that our path is the only way, because no two midlife journeys are exactly the same, right? So we take a broader approach, bringing in everything that we've learned about midlife to give people real options and ideas that fit their life. So we combine coaching and mentoring. That's why we call ourselves, midlife guides and Midlife Crossroads Academy. And we work with midlifers in different ways. We have digital programs, we have ebooks, we have masterclasses. The heart of everything that we do is the Transforming Midlife program. And that's really something that I've poured my heart and soul into. It's a self-paced program. People can go through it in their own time. It's packed with, as I said, everything that we've learned about midlife. It's a blend of psychology, business, social science, marketing, change management. Everything has been added in. Really comprehensive. And it's designed to give midlifers the tools and the insights they need to control their life. So it's basically built on 3 pillars. The first is self-awareness. I've mentioned it before. Self-awareness is the foundation of midlife change. You can't create a fulfilling life without first understanding yourself. That means figuring out what's working for you, what's draining you, what you want more of. So in the Transforming Midlife program, we go deep into things like your personal values, your strengths, your personality traits, and even a Japanese concept called ikigai, which is all about finding out what brings you joy every day in life. It's a really important element. The second pillar of the program sits around change and transition. Basically, midlife is a time of major transitions. I've mentioned those before. So to be able to deal with that, you need to understand how change works and how to move through each stage of a transition. And as part of that, you'll set a midlife goal. I said before, big, small, it doesn't matter. As long as you have something to work towards. And then we'll create a roadmap, specify exactly how you will achieve that goal. And the third pillar of the Transforming Midlife program is what I call it reframing aging. That's a game changer, right? Because it's about seeing the positive side of midlife. Midlife does come with challenges. But if you shift your mindset, you'll see it's also full of opportunity. It's a time when you finally feel comfortable in your own skin. You bring lots of experience to the table. You have so much wisdom to share. So why not lean into that? So that's the third pillar. And I could go on and on about, the programs and the ebooks and the masterclasses, but I know there's only limited time. So maybe some things that I do want to share with your listeners. The first one is connect with us on social media. We share information and inspiration every day on Facebook and Instagram. Secondly, do check out the website. It's midlifecrossroadsacademy.com. You've already visited, so thank you for that. You will find lots of resources, tools, a blog and blogs that will help you better understand midlife and the challenges. And then also, I've actually created a special free resource just for the listeners of this podcast. And since the podcast is called Not Perfect, I thought it would be fitting to create something about dealing with perceived failure in midlife. So I've put together a workbook to help you reframe failure and turn those negative thoughts around. So you can download it using the link in the episode notes.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, thank you for everything. Thank you for that comprehensive overview. And also the workbook, that's amazing. So everybody can, we'll put everything on the show notes, social links, website, everything. So it's easy for people to access, get in contact with you, find out a little bit more about the amazing work you're doing, maybe they can work together, how you can support them. And yeah, I just think it's an important subject, a really important subject, because we're talking about our lives, we're talking about maximizing our lives, enjoying our lives, being fulfilled, being in alignment. And I think that it's quite easy to live out of alignment because we just don't have the tools, or maybe I think equally the support to know how to actually come back into alignment. And I think you've used the word a lot here, and I think it's really, really important. I think the action's important, and I think that's where we struggle. Even if we have the self-awareness, which I think is important, then it's like, how can we act? And I think that you're giving us the self-awareness, but also, I think, which is, in my mind, paramount, you're giving us that support. Just, we can be not.
Indeed, it's midlife is like taking action in midlife is just the most important thing, because everybody will agree when I say you don't get clarity from thinking about something. You get it from taking action and trying things and doing things. You can't figure everything out in your head. You need real world feedback. You need to understand what works or what doesn't work for you. And maybe sometimes things don't work out. Fine. Try something else. Do something else.
Yeah. And that's new knowledge. When it doesn't work out, it's like setbacks, failures. Doesn't work out. Okay, that's great, because we have those insights. We don't have to go down that road again. So yeah, wonderful. I could literally talk to you for all day even. And there is one last question we have on the podcast, which is the recurring question. So if you could invite 3 inspirational for dinner, they can be alive or past. Who might you invite?
Someone who is, I guess, on 80% of the world's population's list, and that's Nelson Mandela. Huh?
Yeah, good choice.
As you've heard him mentioned many times.
He's up there. He's up there for sure.
Yes, the man must be at dinner somewhere every single night. Yes.
He's have lots of dinners, walking through one door to the next from multiple dinners.
Yes, indeed. He I always joke about this, but like I really, really admire the man. Right. I'm married to a South African. Mandela is mentioned on a regular basis in his house, and I always joke about this, but we actually share a life motto. My life motto is, it's only impossible until it's done. That's actually something that Mandela said. And I always say, like, oh, if he hadn't said it first, I would have said.
You're in good company. Company.
Yeah, that would have been my credit. Yeah. Okay, he can have it.
He beat you to the punch.
Yeah, he beat me to it. The second person that I would invite is Pippi Longstocking.
I don't know them. So
Pippi Longstocking. Oh, you're kidding
No,
me.
I don't. I
Oh,
feel bad
wow.
for saying that, but I don't. I'm being honest.
It's a TV series from back in the day when I was a small child, and Pippi lived alone. It's I think it's a Swedish series, even. But she's very well known though. I mean, they even changed her name to English Pippi Longstocking, so she must be known in the English-speaking world as well. But she was this little girl who lived alone in a house. Yeah, I mean, don't ask why. It was a TV series, and she had all these adventures with her two best friends, a boy and a girl, who lived in a normal family. But Pippi Longstocking was like the embodiment of independence and confidence, and she was so fearless in life. She never followed the rules. If that didn't make sense to her, she was very quirky. She had these braids, like she was ginger head, like the braids stuck out like this. But she was amazing. She was so imaginative, and she was very kind. And I found her. She's actually the original role model, I think, for living life on your own terms. You don't have to wait for approval. When you get to midlife, you start appreciating a lot more. So anyway, I'm sure if you were to look on YouTube, you will find some.
I'm going to be doing that immediately after this conversation. So I'll be fully up to speed.
Yeah, we're talking about early 80s when this was shown on screen.
Okay.
So yeah, she's amazing. And my third person would be someone who you probably also never have heard of, but her name is Léonie Lafontaine, and she was a trailblazer for women's rights in Belgium. Yeah. She was born in 2 centuries ago, the mid 1850s, and she co-founded the Belgian chapter of the Rights of Women. Her actions got us in Belgium the vote for women. So she got women the vote in 1949, the year that she died. Yes, I really, really admire that woman. I'm very big on voting and all of that, because I often think like people gave their lives to make sure I got a vote. So, but she to me she shows how determination and passion can really change the world. One person can do that. So yeah, those are my 3.
Wow, that would be an amazing dinner. Imagine the conversation. Imagine how inspired you would. That chat, a dinner with those 3 people changes your life.
Yes. Oh, I can imagine just the wisdom that must come out of those mouths. That must be life changing.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, fundamentally, from that day onwards, your life is changed because it'd just be phenomenal. Feels like a lazy word because I can't think of a better word, but it'd be beyond that. It just would be groundbreaking for anybody that would get to sit down with those 3 people. What would you discuss?
Yeah, indeed.
The knowledge bombs, the sort of moments that rabbits. Tamara, well, I did say I can talk to you forever, and I can do that, but I think that you've got a busy day ahead of you. So I think this is a good place to pause this conversation, and I know that we will have more conversations. Again, love the work that you're doing. I think it is hugely important, and I know that you're going to impact so many of us that feel stuck, feel lost, and just need that ability to stop, pause, reflect, act, and move forward. So I love what you're doing, and I'm looking forward to having more conversations with you. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks as well for spreading the word about midlife being a totally normal period of life that people have to learn to deal with and work out. So thank you for having me on this podcast. I love talking to you too, as always. So yeah.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And thank you everybody for tuning into this episode of My Perfect Failure. Your feedback is very welcome. So do tell us what you like and what you don't like. And if you are watching on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button. It's a great way for us to grow the channel. Until the next time, take care for now. Bye.
Thanks for listening to My Perfect Failure podcast. Be sure to visit www.myperfectfailure.com to join the conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Look out for our next episode.